I would assume you agree that the situation around New York City is bad.
Yes.
Okay, so people say that it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't argument, that if California does shit right, and apparently we are doing it right, and we don't have that situation develop as has in New York City, because the state of New York has 123,000 cases. We have 1/8 of that. We have 15,000 cases, and we have double the population. So we've got per capita roughly 1/15, 1/16 the number of cases per capita. And we've been practicing social distancing for 3 weeks, and we may be lucky, and the number of our cases, which are expected to increase for the next month or so, but we may peak in May, and we may get out of this in California with, fewer than they lowered the estimated number of deaths based on our doing well at social distancing from 4,300 by August to only 1,700 by August. So by social distancing, we're saving the lives of an estimated 2,600 people across the state. Now, percentage-wise, that's only one person in 10,000. But each of those 2,600 people, is somebody, unless they're a fucking, asshole grandma everybody hates, but that's somebody who is beloved by their family members and who wants to not die. If you have states where it's going to be out of control, Florida, Mississippi, Missouri, Oklahoma, Michigan, New Jersey, where they either didn't practice social distancing or they didn't start it soon enough, and you're going to have in each of these states more than 10,000 people dead. So you didn't get to go painting. Maybe it's an overreaction, but it's an overreaction that saves thousands of lives.
All right. So about 3 weeks ago, Rick thought he called me a merchant of death. And he said, how many people are you willing to let die to save the economy? Now, my argument is, number one, more people will die from depression, suicide, and poor health care because the country's going to go into a depression. There was an estimate made that for every percent of unemployment, there are 10,000 suicides. So people that lose their jobs kill themselves too. People that lose their businesses kill themselves. And that's a very well understood ratio. More people will die because of the economic consequences of this shutdown than the flu, or than the virus, in my opinion. But Rick asked me a question. He called me a merchant of death and said, how many lives are you willing to lose to keep the economy going? And I said, the normal amount we lose for a flu season. And then, but I didn't ask my question back. I didn't say, how many people is it worth destroying the United States economy for? And not only the United States economy, but all the countries that depend on us. There are people in India and third world countries that are manufacturing goods for us. There are villages where everyone in the village, thousands and thousands of people, are going to have no job. So when the American economy is destroyed because of the Democrats, because of their hysteria, there will be countries all over the world that are going to have, in the third world, that are going to have people out of work. And when you're out of work in India, you're going to die. There will be thousands and thousands of people dead around the world because the United States isn't buying their goods right now. So my question to you, Rick, is how many people are you willing to kill with this insane germophobia, this insane overreaction. And I'll give you my alternative. My alternative is we open up the states where there's only 100 people dead, or 50 people dead, or 30 people dead, and there are quite a few. There are states where there are only 3 or 4 people that are dead at this point. And so I'm saying we open up these states and let the American economy come back. But how many people are you willing to kill in the process of destroying the economy? Should you shut down the economy to save 1 life? 50 lives? What's your answer, Rick?
I'm looking at the states, and you're right. There are some states, probably roughly 10, 11, where the number of confirmed deaths is less than 10. And maybe, you do at some, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because each state is its own thing, but also people can drive from state to state. And if a state gets out of hand, like Florida, like New York, it has cascading effects. And are you really you wanted to quarantine? You want to what? You want to put troops on the border of New York and New Jersey to stop people from leaving there to get medical services when their hospitals?
I can't even leave the fucking house to do a landscape drawing on the bluffs. If I can't do that, then you shouldn't be able to leave New York and go infect the rest of the country. And I'm not even talking about the state of New York, just New York City maybe. It's already completely locked down.
I know it makes, because you think that if we reopen the country, if we said all but these 5 very bad states, you're free to go about your business and go ahead, gather for Easter. You think that the economic wreckage, when that gets out of hand, when those states go from being good states to bad states, that won't cause further economic devastation?
Well, the elephant in the room is the answer to your question. 1, we've made massive strides in testing. 2, we're on our way to a vaccine. 3, we have several cures. And 4, it might be seasonal. Odds are, not in every case, but in almost every case, this stuff is done by the time the weather gets warm. So I'm saying this thing is probably going to blow over, but it will take the United States economy with it.
All right, so there's not a cure. At best, the chloroquine is an effective therapy. Maybe it knocks down the fatality rate from 2.2% to 1.2%. Maybe, but again, early days and we don't know. And again, it's fucking springtime. It's not summertime. We got 2 months to go until we see if it's going to. So it's not time to say oxyolin free or whatever you fucking say yet. What were your other arguments?
I'm
not going to. Just go ahead.
No one can hear me.
Yeah, they can. Just go ahead.
No, they can't. Okay, so my other arguments is that most of the time when the weather changes, the stuff goes away, but all of the medical things, the vaccines, the cures, the tests, the evaluation of how many people have it to how many people die, all of that we get better at every week. In a month, we'll be even further in testing, in vaccine, in cures. So
it's fucking better to wait a month. It's better to wait a month because the vaccine is 10 months away at best. the tests. We tested more people today than any other day, and we still only tested 140,000 people, and we've tested less than 0.6% of the population. So yeah, we may get better at all this shit, but that's not now. And in the meantime, maybe we should keep people inside until some of this shit gets better. Also, wait a second, the summer shit, it doesn't go away entirely, it drops. And then it maybe comes back. And they did a study on the cities that fared best during 1918, 1919, and the cities that had the least death and the least devastation, economic and otherwise, were the cities that quarantined the longest and who weren't afraid to quarantine again when there was an uptick in the fall. So yeah, we may get 3 or 4 good months from like June through September, October, but we won't know till June until June. So in the meantime, anyway, go ahead. Okay.
All right. So my point is, though, is that in the unlikely event that it comes back, by then we'll have a lot more science. We'll have more ventilators in every city. We'll have more progress on all the drugs. And finally, the one thing that I would like to say that nobody thinks of, and I haven't mentioned so far, is if you're that deathly afraid, if you're such a mother boy, weakling, vile coward, that don't want to leave the house, well, more power to you. You stay in your house. And what we can do is, at this point, everyone knows.
Here, just to say fuck you, because I'm going to be 60 in less than a month. People who are 60, according to the best statistics they have a 3.6% mortality rate. And I just had fucking cancer. So fuck you. I am going to be fucking cautious.
Okay. I was speaking about in general. I wasn't saying you specifically, Rick. If you want to take it that way, that's all right. But the point is that everyone knows that grandma can't leave the house during coronavirus season. If you're that worried about grandma, we know what to do. Those people that wish to live in the 1,000 to 1 odds, 10,000 to 1 odds in California, I know people that haven't left the house for 4 weeks because of a 10,000 to 1 odds that they'll get this and there won't be any drug like hydrochloroquine available. It's Howard Hughes level. I don't know if people know this, but Howard Hughes was a hermit in the 1950s and 60s. He was afraid of getting, he was a multimillionaire. He was one of the world's richest men, and he wouldn't leave the house because he was a germaphobe. Those people that are germaphobes should not be making the decisions for the people that aren't crazy. That's my point, Rick. If you want to be crazy, then that's fine.
The reason the odds are getting lower is because people have fucking stayed in and done social distancing. Carol and I fucking go, she goes out just about every day. She'll go hiking. We go to restaurants. We pick up shit. We just went to the liquor store to get Manischewitz so we can make chorosis, which is this delicious fucking apple dish for Passover. Fucking, you can go out. You can't go every place. And if it turns out that social distancing works, the restrictions will get further relaxed, and you'll be able to paint landscapes. But we'll find out. But if everybody stays in for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, then as we've been finding out, the fucking rates drop, and that allows you to make the argument that it was never really a danger when it really was, because if nobody stayed in, then the rates would be fucking huge, like they are in New York, and like they're going to be in 2 weeks in Florida. Florida has a very stupid governor. He didn't pull people. He didn't close down the beaches when spring break was going on. He didn't close down the state for until oh no, that's the very stupid governor of Georgia. Even though the CDC is located 6 miles from his governor's mansion, he only recently found out that asymptomatic people can have it and can pass it on, and only then did he lock down his state. And those states are going to get bad.
All right. We will find out who was dumb. My argument is that in a state the size of California with 40 million people, if only 350 people have died, I do not think it's because of the lockdown. It might be because of herd immunization. Enough people have already had it or are immune to it. But regardless, though, if the germaphobes should not be making policy for the sane people. The majority of people in this state want to carry out their business. I'm not talking about landscape painting. I'm saying I want California to go back to doing business. That more people will die because we have a massive unemployment situation. And that should be more of a determinant than the kooks that are afraid to leave the house. And if you're afraid to leave the house, be my guest. Stay in your house. And that's the last thing I want to say about this. Okay?
Let's talk about some other shit. Let's talk about slightly different shit, and then let's wrap it up, because it does get fucking tedious.
I'm still looking for your text.
Okay, I just said it's just a fucking. It says I can read it. Cuomo says 74% of those hospitalized in the state have been discharged. Says the number of deaths statewide is dropping for the first time. So, no, he wasn't. I don't think anybody's crying wolf. I feel that when people, to get a handle on it, you got to treat people, you have to practice social distancing, and I mean, this shit doesn't go away on its own, and contrary to what Lance is saying, you don't get herd immunity until some large chunk of the population, at least 10 or 20% of the population, has had it and has developed immunity, and we're nowhere near that. If we're at, you know, even if we're not even at 1% of America having caught it. So no, but when shit gets better, when shit improves, when death estimates decline, then that opens the people up who did the right thing and shut people down. That opens them up to being accused of crying wolves, of making it sound like it was worse than it is, which is just a garbagey argument. We've got proof from bad places around the world that if you don't control it, then the shit gets bad.
All right. Well, you were telling me. I hate to get this so personal, Rick, but I remember at the very beginning of this, you were saying millions of people were going to die. And that's what Fauci said. It wasn't just you, it was what Fauci said. And then it was revised down to hundreds of thousands.
No, Fauci,
and now
both Trump and Fauci said that if nobody did anything, if we just went about our lives, if nobody stayed inside, we just let everybody catch it who's going to catch it. And so that it's similar to a normal flu pandemic, where 10 or 20% of the population gets it, then 2.2 million people would die. But nobody's saying that that is what would happen now that we're now that, that we're doing stuff. Then the estimates were 100,000 to 200,000. And I'm kind of more optimistic now that some of the stuff seems to be working, that may not even hit 150,000. We're at 9,600 U.S. dead right now. But by this time next week, we'll be at about 22,000 U.S. dead. 3 weeks from now, we'll be at 35,000. No, because no, he's preparing for you've seen the disease curves, and they can have various heights depending on the efficacy of what people do and other circumstances. And maybe New York at this late date has gotten lucky and they won't need the 400 more ventilators that they initially thought they might need. It doesn't mean that they were being crying wolf. They were preparing for a variety of outcomes, including some worst case shit in which the curve keeps going up and up. And
Is Rick muted? How's my sound? All right. So the question was, how about Cuomo? Is he pointing the finger? Did he really need all those ventilators? Pointing the finger at Trump. And my argument with Cuomo is that in 2015, he was told that they only had 2,000 ventilators in all of New York. Now, this virus, for people who don't know, you need a ventilator because the way it kills you is it stops you from breathing. And these kinds of flus stop people from breathing. And ventilators are little machines that keep people breathing. So they told him in 2015 that they only had 2,000 for the whole state of New York, or city of New York. And they said, what should you do about it? And Cuomo said, well, do a study on how we can best use the 2,000 that we already have. And he did nothing. He didn't get any more ventilators. And since this whole thing has started, he's done virtually nothing. He was the Democrats in January were telling people not to lock down, not to quarantine. We had things as late in late January, I think February, where they were saying there's nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. Go about your business. Go back to Chinatown. I can find those videos. But the thing that irritates me the most about Cuomo is that all he did was point the finger at Trump and complain and say, "Where's this? I need this. I need that." The governor of New York is almost like a miniature United States president, and he could have potentially. One of the things that Trump said to him is, "Well, what are you doing?" And the press got on Trump like he was going to ignore New York. But Trump was asking the reasonable question, could you try to get your own ventilators? Maybe get some factories building ventilators for yourself? In other words, you've got all of the state of New York. Couldn't you make some hospital gowns or masks or try to get a little bit ahead of this on your own? Which is what a good governor would do instead of sitting there and complaining. I think Cuomo's been nothing but dead weight in this whole thing, and he's been worse than that because he pointed the finger at Trump and said Trump didn't do enough for him.
I don't know. From what I've seen, and I haven't seen enough to really talk about it, Cuomo's been pretty effective, at least recently because the fucking number of deaths, maybe they've peaked, and so it must be doing something right. But I don't know enough to talk about it. Though you mentioned that, that most people just want to go out and live their lives. I did find a survey that shows a partisan gap between Republicans and Democrats and independents about how many people are practicing social distancing, I guess out of some concern for their safety. So 95% of Democrats are taking precautions, or are staying home from school or work, changing travel, or staying away from large gatherings. But only 91% of Republicans and independents are doing the same thing. So you're right, there's a huge gap where 9% of fucking Republicans think it's still okay not to social distance, but overall 92% of America wants to practice this social distancing to reduce the overall risk to themselves and to the country.
I actually have a theory about this. I think that Democrats have always wanted to be controlled by their government. I really think that they are very happy to give up their freedoms to a strong governmental leader that will tell them what to do. And that it just doesn't sit well with Republicans. Republicans do not give up their freedoms as lightly. And I think that that human beings, regardless of whether they're stupid or intelligent, I think they divide into two camps. Those people that want to be independent and free of the government, and those people that are willing to that enjoy the idea of collectivism, of communism, of totalitarianism, of socialism. That somehow, if they cooperate with a group and subordinate their individuality and their freedom, that'll be a better world. And so, yeah, I think the Democrats have the hive mind that they share with communists, and Republicans are more likely to say, you know what, I'll tell Grandma that she can't see me this week. She can stay at her house, and I'll bring her some food and leave it at the doorstep, and we'll handle this.
So you're saying that, according to the survey, only 8% of Americans, on average, just want to run around and do whatever the fuck they want, while 9% of Republicans want to do the same thing. But 91% of Republicans and 92% of the country as a whole are willing to make some sacrifices in terms of activities. And you even listed some of them in order to protect everybody's health. Until we know better, or until the virus subsides. And that's not, you can call it communism or collectivism, or you can call it the most effective fucking thing we can do at this point, as has been proven with previous pandemics, particularly the 1918 super disastrous one that killed 675,000 Americans.
Okay, the difference between this and the 1918 pandemic is that the 1918 pandemic was airborne. So that particular flu, the Spanish flu, the Spanish influenza, you could get just by breathing within the same city block as somebody else that had it. So there was no way that they could protect against that. And if it was unbelievably dangerous and lethal. Airborne is a nightmare, and that's the first thing. But the second thing,
this virus is the same thing. It's virus particles that hang in the air. It's the same fucking thing. Unless you're willing to tell me that coronavirus particles are like 10 times the diameter of Spanish flu particles, which they aren't, the means of transmission is the same thing. People breathe out droplets. The droplets hang in the air. You breathe them in. It's airborne. Coronavirus is definitely fucking airborne. It's not. It's airborne.
Let me explain the difference between different kinds of airborne, okay? Now, neither Rick nor I are virologists, but I can tell you from what I've read during this crisis, when they say coronavirus is airborne, it's more like if you spit out, if you sneeze in the same room as somebody. Yeah, it's airborne. It floats around from the spray that came out of your nose or your mouth. The Spanish flu was so airborne that it could affect people a block away. It was traveling infinitely. It was infinitely more airborne. It was floating around constantly. It was one person could go into a school and sneeze, and the entire school would be killed. So the Spanish influenza was a much better description of what airborne is possible to be. Don't interrupt me. Now, as far as the weird poll that Rick read, that was obviously propaganda. The poll where he said there's only a difference of 9% or 5% between Republicans and Democrats. No, there's a huge difference. The way that question was worded was a dead giveaway. The question was something like, are you willing to make any kind of effort? Yeah, everyone's willing to make some kind of effort. You have to be far more specific when you take a poll if you want to get clear results. And these poll takers didn't want to because they wanted everyone to say, yeah, let's live like frightened little animals like germaphobes. Let's all hunker down. Yeah. Well, the truth is that your typical conservative believes that he can live his life, go to work, not sneeze on the people he knows, wash his hands more frequently, isolate elderly people, isolate people that are overweight with diabetes. There are a variety of common sense things that conservatives are willing to do. My point is, Democrats are insane. They want the entire nation to be hunkered down in complete zombie apocalypse quarantine until the United States goes broke. That's what the Democrats want. They're crazy.
So I found R0 for the various flu and other pandemics we've had. R0 is the number of people that each person with the particular disease infects on average. So estimates for our current range from 1.4 to 5, with the World Health Organization saying it's at 1.95, other researchers saying it's around 2.2. So each person with coronavirus on average will infect 2 other people. So let's compare its contagiousness to the seasonal flu. Regular flu, 1.3. So regular flu is only 2/3 as contagious. H1N1 from 2009, Obama's one, the swine flu, 1.5. It was only 3/4 as contagious. 1957 flu pandemic, R0 1.7, 85% as contagious as coronavirus. 1918, the one you said that was so fucking contagious, R0 1.8, roughly 90% as contagious as our current shit. So no, it's that the 1918 virus was not super duper contagious. It was within 10% as being, it was roughly 10% less contagious than our current shit. It wasn't some super bug compared to the current shit.
Well,
SARS, super contagious, R not, 2 to 5. So it's lucky we hammered that shit. All right.
hello? Hello?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that doesn't really help your argument, because saying that the Spanish influenza was 90% as contagious as coronavirus, okay, so basically they were equally contagious. That may be the case, but I can tell you that plague, for example, bubonic plague, that goes. There are a variety of illnesses, not necessarily the Spanish influenza, although I think I'm more right than wrong on that one. But let's just say this. A truly airborne illness will spread the way I said. It's far more lethal than far more contagious. The coronavirus is very contagious, but truly airborne illnesses are far more contagious. They can strike far more people. And you can look at various plagues and maladies that we've had over the centuries. Coronavirus is not as airborne as other illnesses that are much worse.
Wait a second. The plague was not airborne. The plague was carried by lice on rats.
I know that. I know that the plague was carried by lice on rats, but I also think that coronavirus, I'll go to my grave on this. Coronavirus is only airborne in a more limited way than a truly airborne virus would be. In other words, if you sneeze in a room that is in a small room with someone, they will get it because it's airborne. But a truly airborne virus or disease can get someone a block away. That's my point. The wind can carry it a block and get someone. That's all I have to say.
I'll say they did the same shit in 1918. Carroll found pictures of people walking around in masks and saying somebody was wearing a sign saying, "Don't wear a mask and go to jail." And they did the same shit, and it worked in the cities that did it. It fucking worked. All right, let's go on to talk about the election, how we're going to do the primaries, the rest of the primaries, the Democratic and Republican National Convention, and the general election, where Trump has said that if we allow voting by mail, then no Republican's ever going to win again. And you're going to say, well, that's because of massive fraud. And I'm going to say, well, no, it's because you guys win by disenfranchising non-Republicans. So let's have that fucking argument for half a second. And then let's wrap it up.
All right. This is really a common sense argument. The only reason that a party would not want someone to have to show up at the polling place with their voter ID, with a picture ID, is because they're planning to cheat. It's not because of massive racism. I don't believe that the United States is this massive hotbed of racism where we're desperately trying to keep black people from voting. I think that if you want an honest and fair election, you will require people to go to the polling place themselves with their own bodies and show a picture ID. And because if you don't do that, then you will end up with massive voter fraud. You'll end up with cheating. And there are 100 ways that the Democrats have thought of to cheat. They have voter harvesting in California now. where someone just shows up at an apartment building and says, all right, I'm going to take all your votes, and they actually have been found to be helping the people in the apartment building to vote Democrat. There are ways of lying. What you do is you take the name of somebody that's 98 years old in a rest home, and you know that person's not going to go down to the polling place, and you go down and you vote for them. You say that I'm Ebenezer Wilkinson, the 98-year-old former baseball player with the Cincinnati Red Stockings, and I'm going to vote right now. So it's very, very easy to cheat doing things the way the Democrats want to do them. And also, they can give driver's licenses to illegal aliens who then can vote. So there are a million ways to cheat. Democrats have been cheating.
All right. So what about some other ways that don't have? So you don't like vote by mail. But what about vote by Skype, where you show up to your local precinct via your Skype if you're able to, and say, hey, Jim, you know me. We've been neighbors, and I've been coming to your polling place for 40 years. And here I am on the computer. It's me, right? And Jim's like, yes. Okay, so there's your vote. And what about extended voting? So what if we extend the election so it runs, and most states do early election anyway, so we allow, there's a national 10-day election period so people can show up at their polling places anytime over 10 days, and that means that at any one time there aren't that many, or you allow people even to make appointments so that you know that there will be no more than 10 people voting at any one place at any one time to avoid crowds. You okay with that?
I think that one of the things the Democrats like to do is they like to have these 3 or 4 week voting periods. They like to have early voting that creates more chaos, more opportunities to just find new ballots, find new votes. I think there should be, at most, maybe 2 days where you could vote. I'm okay with having it on a weekend, so, for people that aren't at work. I mean, if you're sick, if you're on your deathbed, maybe some allowance could be made. But my point is that that's not what the Democrats want. They want rolling elections that go on where people can start voting a month early. They want no voter ID, so you don't have to prove you are who you are. And they want ballot harvesting, where someone just goes to a neighborhood and says, I'm here to pick up the votes. And that's a recipe for disaster and corruption and intimidation. So, Rick, the Democrats want to do these things to our elections because they're corrupt thieves. I have found records of them committing fraud. Do you know the voter registrations in California and in Illinois, 2 prominent Democrat states, had hundreds of thousands of dead people registered to vote. Dead people and people that weren't even living in those Democrat states, people that had moved away. So, so these voter frauds are a common practice among Democrats. I have a quote from the voter commission, the election commissioner of New York State, saying that the Democrats were bringing in busloads of voters. So I'm sorry, Rick. Why don't you just fucking leave our elections alone and do them with voter ID in a 2 or 3 day period, and that's it.
All right. So I think we found. I don't want to argue every single point. So because I want to wrap it up, I will say that over the history of our nation, each major party has had a record, whatever the party was at the time. No party has been entirely clean with voting. And I think, like in the election, the Kennedy-Nixon election of 1960, I think each side fucked around with the vote. And I'd say that more recently, the Republicans have been more successful at fucking with voting. But I will say that this is a thing where we almost agree on something. You're willing to give people 2 days to vote to reduce crowds at the polls. So that's fucking something. Where and on that, some little iota of agreement. Can we wrap this up? Good. Okay.
Uh, JD, or I used the wrong word. The person, a question has been put: should China, should we be dependent on China? I hope this is the end of America's love affair with China. I want to pull all our factories back of any kind. I want nothing to do with that country. I want as few Chinese coming from mainland China as possible. I want them kicked out of our universities. I want our economies to be uncoupled, and I want them out of our universities. I would close down Disneyland if I could in China. Okay?
All right. So China for the U.S. It's nice to be the #1 country in the world, and for ever since the end of World War II, the U.S. has been the #1 country in the world. But we are being challenged by global powerhouses. Once Russia fell, for a while we had the Soviet Union fell. For a while we were unchallenged as the #1 country in the world. But now China, they've got 4 times our population. They have a very effective, in terms of being a powerful country, combination of authoritarian government and pro-capitalist government. I mean, they've still got this communist framework, which is really an authoritarian framework, but they want to succeed in the world marketplace. And so they're a tough enemy. To the extent they're an enemy, and they ought to in a lot of ways, they are an enemy. And they steal our intellectual property. If you go to them, because they make shit really cheaply, and often really well for cheaply, they will steal your technology. And they'll steal your technology even if you don't go to them. And obviously they want to be the world's most powerful nation. And they do some stuff. They'll fight us economically using fair means, and they'll fight us economically and politically using unfair means. And yeah, we have to stand up to China, and we also have to be strong on our own. We have to be a pro-science and technology nation. We have to work harder ourselves. And this shit's going to be tough, because it's tough to fight a country with 4 times your population and with an increasingly educated population that wants to be the world's most powerful country. So yeah, do we have to do everything Lance says? No, I like being the honeypot country of the world, where we can offer the smartest people from every other country of the world the chance to come here, go to school, and stay here and have awesome lives. But I don't disagree entirely. I mean, yeah, China is this behemoth that will crush us if we let it. All right, the end.